dare you? Do you know how much this dinner is worth? Do you know who I am?
I'm sorry, ma. I'll get the right one now, please.
Adaeze, what did you just do?
She didn't answer him. She didn't even look at him. And it was that, not the slap, not the silence, not the phone recording every second of it, that told Tunde something in his marriage had just broken in a way no apology would fix. By morning, that video would have 3 million views, and somewhere inside Tunde, a decision he had been avoiding for years finally, irreversibly, began to take shape. If watching that opening made your chest tighten even a little, I need you to do 3 things right now. Hit subscribe, tap that like button, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from. Because I promise you, this story is about to take you somewhere you won't see coming. To understand how Adaeze Bakare became the woman in that video, you have to go back almost 15 years to a 2-bedroom face me, I face you compound in Ajegule, where a girl named Adaeze Nkusu grew up watching her mother, Mama Nkiru, leave the house at 5 every morning to clean other people's homes in Ikoyi and return every evening smelling of bleach and exhaustion. Adaeze remembered with a clarity that never faded the day her mother came home with a swollen cheek because a madam in Parkview had slapped her for arriving 11 minutes late, 11 minutes lost to a motorway breakdown on the 3rd Mainland Bridge that had nothing to do with her. She remembered her mother crying quietly at the kitchen table that night, not from the pain of the slap, but from the humiliation of returning to that same house the next morning and smiling because they needed the money. One day, young Adaeze whispered to herself more than she could count, "Nobody will ever look at me the way they look at my mother." That vow would follow her for the rest of her life, and eventually it would poison the very thing it was meant to protect. She met Tunde Bakare at 22, waitressing at a small buka near Yaba while studying business administration part-time, saving every naira towards a dream she barely believed she'd reach. He was 26 then, driving a rusted Toyota Corolla, running a 2-man construction supply business that mostly lost money, dust permanently under his fingernails, and a stubbornness that refused to accept failure as final. What drew her to him wasn't her beauty, though she had plenty of that. It was the way she remembered every regular customer's order without writing it down, the way she slipped extra meat onto the plate of an old man everyone else in the buka ignored, the way she laughed, loud, unguarded, generous, as if joy cost nothing and she intended to spend it freely. "You are going to run something big someday," he told her once, almost half joking, as she counted out his change. "And you're going to be the one who can't afford me," she shot back, grinning, and he laughed so hard he nearly choked on his rice. They married 3 years later in a small ceremony neither family could fully afford, and for the first several years of their marriage, poverty was still close enough to touch. She remembered what it felt like to be looked down on. By every account from those who knew her then, she was kind, the kind of woman who tipped generously even when she barely had enough, who greeted market women by name, who once gave away her own school fees savings to a stranded taxi driver without a second thought. Then, Tunde's business found its footing. A government contract here, a partnership there, and within 8 years, Bakare Construction and Logistics had become one of the fastest growing infrastructure firms in Lagos. They moved from Yaba to Surulere, from Surulere to Ikeja GRA, and finally into a 5-bedroom duplex behind the tall gates of a private estate in Lekki Phase 1. And somewhere between the second house and the third, something in Adaeze began to change. Not overnight, but the way rust spreads, quietly from the inside. It started small. A market woman shortchanged her 200 naira once, an honest mistake quickly corrected, but Adaeze screamed at her in front of an entire row of stalls until the woman was in tears. A driver arrived 4 minutes late one rainy afternoon and she docked his pay without explanation. Gatemen, cleaners, delivery boys, anyone she perceived as beneath her became a target for a cruelty that seemed to grow hungrier the more it was fed.
Tunde noticed. Of course he noticed. And in the beginning, he tried, gently, the way a husband who still remembers falling in love with someone tries. "Baby, you didn't have to talk to him like that," he said once, after she'd reduced the young valet to tears over a scratch on the car that had been there for months. "These people will walk all over you if you are not firm, Tunde. You've forgotten where weakness gets you." "There's a difference between firm and cruel." "Is there?" she said, already turning away. "Ask my mother how far being soft got her." That answer should have told him everything. Instead, it became the excuse he accepted again and again for years. A wound dressed up as wisdom, a trauma performing as toughness. He kept correcting her privately, patiently, sometimes angrily. She kept promising to do better, and then within days, the pattern would repeat. Every warning he gave her, she absorbed and then discarded, the way water runs off stone that has forgotten how to soften. By the time the slap inside that Victoria Island restaurant reached 3 million views, comment sections across 4 different platforms were calling her by a name that would follow the Bakare family for months. Reporters called Tunde's office. 2 prospective foreign investors quietly withdrew from a partnership meeting scheduled for that week, citing reputational concerns neither of them needed to spell out further. His own mother called him in tears, asking if it was true, asking what had happened to the sweet girl from the buka she remembered. That night, for the first time in 7 years of marriage, Tunde sat across from his wife and did not raise his voice, did not plead, did not offer another gentle correction destined to be forgotten by morning. "Adaeze," he said quietly, "I need you to understand something. This is no longer just about how you treat people. This has become the loudest thing anyone knows about our family, and I am done watching it happen." "So it's now about the business," she snapped, deflecting the way she always deflected when the truth got too close. "Not about me, about your money." "It was never just about the business," he said, and something in his voice made her go still. "It was about a woman I fell in love with because she remembered everyone's name and gave away her own school fees to a stranger. And I don't know where she went." For the first time in years, Adaeze had no comeback ready. If that line hit you the way it hit me the first time I heard this story, comment below and tell me, do you think she can still find her way back to who she used to be? Let's find out. The days following the video were the most tense of their marriage. Tunde moved into the guest wing, not out of cruelty, but because he needed distance to think clearly, away from the practiced charm she still occasionally deployed to smooth things over. He stopped attending events with her. He stopped defending her when friends brought up the video in careful, roundabout ways. And for the first time, Adaeze felt something she hadn't felt in over a decade. The cold, creeping fear of losing something she couldn't simply buy back. She tried everything familiar to her. She apologized loudly, publicly, arranging a widely shared social media post expressing regret that read more like a press release than a confession. She sent the waiter she had struck an envelope of cash, hoping the gesture would erase what the slap represented. He returned it, quietly, through the restaurant manager, without a single word. And that silence unsettled Tunde more than any accusation could have. That was when he understood the truth would need more than an apology to surface. It would need something she could not perform her way through. It would need to be lived. He did not tell her what he was planning. For nearly 3 weeks, while the household existed in a brittle, uneasy quiet, Tunde made quiet arrangements of his own. a visit to his lawyer, a visit to an old family friend who ran a community empowerment non-profit in Ajegunle, and a private visit to a modest one-room apartment he had not set foot in for years. It was there, in that visit, that a piece of the story neither Adaeze nor even Tunde fully understood came into focus. "She sends me money every month," Mama Nkiru told him quietly when he gently asked how she was managing. "She has sent it since the day you two married. She has never missed a month. She just does not want anyone to know, not even you." Tunde sat with that in silence for a long moment. His wife, who had slapped a waiter over a bottle of wine, who screamed at market women over 200 naira, had also been quietly, privately supporting her own mother for 15 years without even once asking for credit, the one unbroken thread of tenderness still running beneath everything else. "Why does she hide it?" he asked. Mama Nkiri's eyes filled and she looked away. "Because to help me is to admit where she came from, and she has spent her whole life terrified that if people remember where she came from, they will treat her the way they treated me."
It was not an excuse. Tunde understood that clearly, sitting in that small room. Nothing here excused the slap, or the valet reduced to tears, or the market woman humiliated in front of her own customers. Cruelty rooted in old pain is still cruelty, and every person Adaeze had wounded deserved real acknowledgement, real repair. But for the first time, Tunde understood the exact shape of the wound driving the behavior, and he understood that shouting at it, punishing it, or exposing it publicly would only teach her that power still ruled everything, just wielded from a different hand. He needed something wiser than an ultimatum. He needed the truth to reach her the way it had reached him, quietly, undeniably, through an experience she could not talk, cry, or pay her way out of. If you think you already know what he decided to do, comment your guess below. But stay with me, because this next part is the twist even I didn't expect the first time I heard how this story actually unfolded. 3 days later, Tunde told Adaeze he was taking her on a short trip. A wellness retreat, he said. 2 hours outside Lagos. No staff, no drivers, phones limited to emergencies only, a chance to reset before the reputational crisis escalated further. Given the pressure they were under, she agreed almost gratefully, relieved at the thought of disappearing from public view for a while. What he did not tell her was that there was no wellness retreat. What he had actually arranged, with the quiet help of his old friend Chuka and a small trusted circle who owed him favors from years back, was something far more deliberate. For 10 days, Adaeze Bakare would live as an ordinary woman with no visible wealth, no recognizable name, staying in a modest guest house in a working-class part of Ibadan where absolutely no one knew who the Bakares were. Carrying a small fixed daily budget, required to navigate transport, meals, and errands entirely on her own, exactly as millions of people she had spent years dismissing did every single day. She was furious when she discovered the truth on the first morning, discovering her designer bag and phone locked away, replaced with a modest bag containing a change of clothes and 20,000 naira for 10 days. "You tricked me," she said, voice shaking with rage. "I protected you while giving you something you would never survive without protection," Tunde said calmly. "Everything has been arranged quietly. You are safe, you are watched from a distance always by someone I trust. But for 10 days, nobody is going to treat you like Mrs. Bakare, because for 10 days, nobody is going to know that woman exists." It was without question the wisest decision he had ever made in their marriage. Not a punishment performed for an audience, not a public unveiling designed to shame her the way she had shamed so many others, but a controlled, protected mirror, built with enough care that she could face the truth without being destroyed by it. The first 2 days, she was simply angry, snapping at a bus conductor who corrected her fare, huffing at a market woman who wouldn't lower her price, still carrying, out of habit, the same brittle entitlement she had carried in Lekki. But money that doesn't replenish itself has a way of humbling even the proudest pride. And by the 5th day, with her small budget dwindling faster than she expected, and a minor stomach bug leaving her weak and desperate for help, Adaeze found herself standing in the rain outside a small provision store, asking a stranger, an ordinary market woman named Iyabuki, for the smallest kindness. A place to sit, a cup of warm water, 5 minutes of shelter from a downpour she had no umbrella for. And for a moment, waiting to see whether this stranger would look at her the way she had looked at people beneath her for years, Adaeze felt something close to real fear. Iyabuki did not hesitate. She pulled a plastic chair from behind her counter, placed a small kettle on a stove, and sat beside a woman she had never met in a downpour that had nothing to do with either of them, simply because someone was cold and needed warmth. "Thank you," Adaeze whispered, and something in her voice cracked open completely. "No need to thank me, my sister," Iyabuki said, waving a hand. "We are all somebody's daughter, standing in somebody's rain." If you are wondering whether this is the moment everything changed, stay with me a little longer, because what Adaeze does with what she learns in Ibadan is the real turning point of this entire story. And if it's moving you even slightly, this is a good time to subscribe, because stories about people finding their way back rarely get the attention they deserve. Adaeze wept in that small shop for a long time, and Iyabuki, without ever asking a single question, simply let her. When Tunde came to collect her on the 10th day, he found his wife sitting quietly outside the guest house, her small bag beside her, her face changed in a way money had not once been able to change. "I understand now," she said before he could speak, "what my mother felt every single day of her life. And I understand what I've been doing to people over and over to make sure I never had to feel it myself." "I didn't do this to break you," Tunde said quietly.
"I know," she said. "You did it because you were watching someone you loved disappear, and you refused to just stand there and let her go." The months that followed were not a fairy tale. Change rarely is. There were relapses, moments where old sharpness crept back into her voice with a hesitant driver or a slow waiter, catching her by surprise, forcing her to stop herself mid-sentence, and for the first time in her adult life, apologize without an audience to perform for. But something had genuinely shifted, and it was Adaeze herself, 3 weeks after returning from Ibadan, who came to Tunde with an idea rather than waiting to be told what to do. Using part of their own resources, they established the Mama Nkiru Dignity Initiative together, a program providing fair wage contracts, healthcare access, and small business grants to domestic workers, market traders, drivers, and service staff across Lagos. Adaeze Bakare became its director, not as a sentence handed down to her, but as a role she had chosen, week after week, sitting across from women exactly like her mother and exactly like Iyabuki, negotiating fair wages for drivers exactly like the ones she'd once dismissed without a second thought. She personally found the waiter she had struck, sat with him for over an hour, and offered not cash this time, but a genuine apology and a fully funded scholarship towards the hospitality management program he'd always wanted to pursue. He accepted, watching her carefully, the way people who've been hurt learn to watch the ones who hurt them, uncertain but willing to be proven wrong. 18 months after the slap that nearly ended everything, the Mama Nkiru Dignity Initiative had negotiated fair wage contracts for over 1,100 domestic and service workers across Lagos, and Adaeze Bakare stood at a small community event in Ajegunle, not Victoria Island, not Lekki, but the very neighborhood she came from, handing a business grant certificate to a young girl not much older than she had been when she first vowed that nobody would ever look at her the way they looked at her mother. Watching from the back of that small, crowded hall, Tunde understood, finally, that he had not fixed his wife. People are not machines to be repaired. He had simply done what love at its wisest sometimes requires. Not punishment, not humiliation performed for an audience, but the patient, deliberate courage to place someone back in the rain until they remembered in their own bones what it felt like to need shelter. Somewhere in Ibadan, in a small provisions shop, a market woman named Iyaboki still had no idea her small kindness to a stranger in the rain had quietly rebuilt a marriage and reshaped over 1,000 lives. And somewhere in Ajegunle, an old woman kept a new photograph on her wall, not of her daughter's wedding, not of the mansion in Lekki, but of the day Adaeze knelt beside her own mother and for the first time in 15 years simply said, "Thank you." The real wealth this story leaves behind isn't in the buildings Tunde Bakare built across Lagos. It's in the quiet, deliberate decision one man made to save his marriage, not through anger, not through exposure, but through a single wise act of love disguised as an ordinary trip. And it's in the harder, braver decision one woman made, standing in someone else's rain, to finally let herself be seen. Now I'd love to hear from you. What's the biggest lesson you are taking away from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read them and I love seeing the different perspectives this community brings. If this is your first time discovering our channel, welcome. We tell stories that entertain, inspire, and remind us that every choice has consequences and every act of kindness or cruelty leaves a mark. We'd love for you to become part of our growing family, so hit that subscribe button and join our community. There's always another unforgettable story waiting for you here. And to everyone who's been with us already, thank you for your support, your comments, your likes, and for coming back story after story. You are the reason this community keeps growing. Before you leave, don't stop here. Pick another video from the channel and keep the journey going. I truly believe you won't regret it. Until our next story, take care of yourself, stay safe, and remember to always choose kindness whenever you can. You'll never know whose life you are making easier. Goodbye.